responsibilities to this House and to the other place with the maximum level of speed and with unwavering commitment, because we know that as the voices of those directly affected by the Holocaust fade, we must do everything we can to ensure that there is a fitting memorial to this country's role and place in supporting them.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Mr. Speaker, why is my right honourable friend refusing to let members of this House see the original and revised impact assessments of his neo-socialist Renters Reform Bill? The Independent Regulatory Policy Committee rejected the first impact assessment as not fit for purpose. Will he ensure that we see that and the second version before we debate the bill at second reading?
Well, I'm hugely in favour of publishing impact assessments, but one of the things that I can reassure this House is that the proposal that he mentions as neo-socialist was in the manifesto under which we secured a record-breaking majority in 2019, and the key provisions of it were backed not just by my right honourable friend, the member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, but also by other noted neo-socialists, including the member for South West Norfolk as well.
Secretary of State Lisa Nandy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's nice to see an outbreak of consensus in this House. The Secretary of State is a neo-socialist, and the Bert and Ernie of British politics have been reunited once more. Can he tell us, though, why he didn't decide to allow the NAO to investigate the serious allegations about misuse of public money and assets on Teesside?
State.
We consulted with the NEO and with others, and we felt that it was most appropriate to have a genuine independent inquiry. I think it's important to state that there is no evidence that has come to light hitherto of any suggestion of corruption, as has been alleged by some in this House. What we do need to do, and this was the explicit request of the Mayor, is quickly and expeditiously and authoritatively provide people with the reassurance that they all want. At the moment, I'm afraid, there is a real risk that investment in Teesside could be frozen or chilled as a result of the programme of misinformation that has been sedulously spread by Labour Party colleagues in Tees Valley.
Lisa Nandy.
It really does beg a belief. He knows very well that the Mayor in question asked specifically for an NAO investigation. That is a request that was backed by 3 select committee chairs, the official opposition and countless others. But instead, he has chosen to launch an investigation on his own terms, hand-picking a panel to investigate an issue where accountability has totally broken down, as a result of a flawed system of accountability that he's presided over for years, without heeding the concerns of members on all sides of this House and the NAO itself. These are not his assets. These assets belong to the people on Teesside, and they deserve answers. So can I ask him seriously how anyone could possibly have faith in this investigation process or this government when they've chosen to block the NAO from investigating?
State.
Well, the Honourable Lady once again seeks to raise question marks over what's happened in Tees Valley in a way that her Labour Party colleagues have done. I would gently point out that under the 13 years of this Labour government, the constituencies and the communities of Tees Valley were neglected. That is why Ben Houchen was elected as Mayor. He is bringing investment to the Tees Valley, investment that never happened in the 13 years that Labour were in power. And because it hurts so much for the Labour Party to acknowledge that it's a Conservative Mayor who's delivering for working people in Tees Valley, what they engage in is a campaign of innuendo unworthy of the Party of Working People.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the ONS, Kirklees Council is significantly underperforming in delivering EHCPs within the 20-week target, particularly compared to the national average and other councils in West Yorkshire. Would the Minister agree with me that the Council is letting our children and parents down, and that we need to see a real improvement when the next ONS report is published later this month?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This policy area is led by the Department of Education, but I would agree that Kirklees Council needs to improve its performance on EHCPs. I understand that colleagues from the Department of Education have been working closely with them to support them in doing so. We are awaiting the most recent publication of figures, which are due to be released imminently.
Nadia Witt.
Mr. Speaker, over 1 million households are waiting for social homes, with more than 9,000 in Nottingham alone. But rather than expanding our council housing stock, last year there was a net loss nationally of 14,000 council homes. So when will the government take action on our housing crisis and enable council housing to be built en masse?
Well, I share the Honourable Lady's commitment to making sure that there is more socially rented housing, indeed more affordable housing overall. Again, I would gently point out that we've built more social homes under this administration than was built under the previous Labour government. And I should also point out that under the previous Conservative Mayor of London, more homes were built than under the current Mayor of London. If you want affordable urban housing, then you need to have, and indeed the previous Labour Mayor, if you want affordable urban housing, then you need to have Conservative leadership in City Hall.
Erin Brickley.
Mr. Speaker, after speaking to residents in Mercer Park this weekend in Hyndburn, after the successful Let's Move Hyndburn event, it came to my attention that we do have a real lack of disabled facilities in parks across Hyndburn and Haswell Linden. Will the Minister agree to meet with me to discuss how we can provide local authorities with the funding that they need so that people don't have to travel outside of the constituency?
So state.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for raising that issue, and whether it's Oswald or Accrington, we do need to make sure that people living with disabilities have the support they need, and whether it's I or another minister in the department, we will make sure that a meeting happens quickly.
Okay, toss more.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are hundreds of families in my constituency who are living for months on end in hotels as they can no longer afford to rent and the council has no suitable temporary accommodation left. Local authorities currently don't have the powers or funding they need to tackle the crisis. So will the Secretary of State confirm how he is going to change that and give councils like Enfield the resources they need to end this hotel crisis?
Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate the nature of the problem that the Honourable Lady mentions, and there are too many people who are in temporary accommodation. I will look at the challenges that Enfield Council faces in terms of the delivery of housing, including affordable housing for the vulnerable families that she champions, and hope to be able to report back on more in due course.
Van Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, house prices are all over the headlines yet again, but it's affordability that is the key issue. Does my right honourable friend, the Housing Minister, agree with me that when we do get new houses built, often taking years and years to go through planning, they all look like identical estates, just like the estates that we have already? We need affordable homes that local people can aspire to and retirement homes for later living. Does she agree with me that we need to build the right houses in the right place?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend very much, as he represents a new town, as I do, very proud to represent the new town of Redditch. We are absolutely committed to building the right houses in the right places, and that includes enabling local communities to have more say over the design and type of housing. We're doing that through the Levelling Up Bill, through design codes, through street votes, through reforming planning system. And I'm also pleased to report to him that I also launched a task force for older people's housing to address the housing needs of older people.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attention, the staggering complacency of the Secretary of State in dismissing legitimate and serious complaints and concerns about the use of hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. I should warn him that that type of response may well come back and bite him. But if there's to be any possibility of this House and the people of Teesside having any confidence in the findings of the inquiry that he has commissioned, then that must have all the powers it needs to demand and secure whatever evidence and documentation it determines necessary, and anyone must be able to submit that evidence to the inquiry. Will he give those commitments?
State.
Well, again, if I'm tempted to say, if the honourable gentleman has evidence, please do share it. It is the case that Labour in Teesside, including Labour on Middlesbrough, have consistently sought to undermine, thwart and oppose those efforts at economic development and investment that the Mayor of Tees Valley has brought forward. And I recognise that the honourable gentleman has made a number of allegations in this House which he's been reluctant to repeat outside. We look forward to him we look forward to him putting us right in a way which is actually contributing to the welfare of the people of Tees Valley rather than advancing the agenda of the Labour Party.
Look, I've allowed some of these to stretch, but we are on topical, so you won't mind staying a while. Danny Kruger.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Wiltshire urgently needs a lot more housing, and the good news is that we're getting it. For the last 6 years, we have met our house building target by 130%, 4,000 new houses in Wiltshire every year. But because developers routinely underestimate their future building forecasts, we have a theoretical shortage in the 5-year land supply. And because inspectors routinely declare that local plans are out of date, it means that these developers can impose unwanted and ugly developments on that communities don't want. So will the Secretary of State use the NPPF review to exempt council...
Order. I'm sorry, but the topical question is meant to be short and punchy. It's not like your previous question. You're just going to shorten it down. Can somebody answer that, please?
My honourable friend is on exactly the right lines. That's what the NPPF consultation hopes to do.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Speaker, I've raised the issue of overseas voters in this place before and understand that the regulations will be brought forward by the end of the year, but we might have a general election by then and we need 6 months between the regulation and the general election for it to take effect. Can the Secretary of State provide more clarity and a guarantee that overseas voters will be able to vote?
I will do everything in my power to make sure that there is at least 6 months between those regulations coming forward and any general election.
Sir James Duddridge.
The Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Levelling Up has been very generous in her time discussing the future of Essex. Could she reassure the House that no plans for a combined authority will go forward without certainly the majority of Essex MPs' support? Because at the moment, I'm pretty sure none of us want it.
Well, we're absolutely clear that any devolution deals must be locally led with local consent. I've consulted with the Honourable Gentleman. We will continue to have such conversations, but ultimately this is about getting the best for the people of Essex, and I know he will share my ambition to deliver that.
Conor McCarthy.
Contains commitments to working with local leaders to deliver a brownfield-first approach and to support biodiversity by working with partners to protect, enhance or create new environmental assets. Yet they're planning to put 260 housing units on Brislington Meadows, a beautiful nature-rich site in my constituency, going against the wishes of the council, local residents, the mayor and me. Does the Secretary of State really think the plan is worth the paper it's written on if Homes England doesn't put its principles into practice?
I do have a lot of sympathy with the Honourable Lady's position, and I will look closely at that proposal. I agree with her, and indeed with the Shadow Secretary of State, that the Green Belt is a valuable environmental asset that we need to protect. But sadly, that is not the view of the Leader of the Opposition.
Henry Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reforming planning policy to deliver more homes, can I have an assurance that the Brownfield First policy will be paramount to protect the Green Belt and greenfields from development?
Yes, absolutely, and that is, as indeed the Honourable Lady from Bristol East has pointed out, absolutely at the heart of the strategic plan for Homes England.
Speaker, what discussions he's had with devolved counterparts on the potential location of investment zones in Scotland, and what steps he's taking to tailor those zones to Scotland's economic strengths and the Scottish Government's ambition of transitioning to a well-being economy?
I've had good conversations with the SNP leaders of Aberdeen and Dundee Council, and indeed the SNP leader of Glasgow Council, and also with the Deputy First Minister about precisely this. We want to make sure that investment zones like Freeports are an example of the Scottish Government and the UK Government working in a way which is better together.
Simon Chubb.
Mr. Speaker, in order to hit the Government's new sewage reduction targets, water companies like South West Water must make sure that infrastructure can cope with new housing developments. With that in mind, would my right honourable friend update the House on what plans the Government has to make sure water companies are statutory consultees in major housing developments?
Seriously?
Well, my honourable friend has talked to me about this issue before, and I think that his concerns are absolutely on the button. I should say that there are proposals that have been brought forward by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for DEFRA, to dramatically improve the way in which wastewater treatment works operate, but there is still more to do, and his point is very well made.
Thank you. We now can Clive Efforder's final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Master Gunner Place in my constituency are still paying for a waking watch despite a new fire alarm being introduced. Now, these properties were built by Countryside Properties with major defects in them. They're now owned by Sumnas, And I want to know what the Minister is going to do to take these people to task, because they are costing my constituents a lot of money which should have been resolved before.
Well, the honourable gentleman has seen that we've recently reopened the Waking Watch Fund, but on the specific issue that he has raised, I would be happy to meet with him, because I would want to also understand why this has not been removed as a result of the money spent.
Excellent. That completes questions. We now come to personal statement. Matt Hancock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful for you giving me the opportunity to make this personal statement at the earliest possible opportunity. In March, I wrote to the Standards Commissioner to give context to an investigation he was leading about actions taken in response to a government call to arms during the pandemic. The Commissioner found that in doing so, I inadvertently committed a minor breach of the House rule that forbids members from lobbying the Commissioner or members of the committee over an investigation. The Committee on Standards found that I did not seek to break the rules, had no prospect of personal gain and acted without malice. However, they recommended that I apologise to the House and the Commissioner for this minor breach and underlined that respect for the Code and the processes of investigating potential breaches of the Code is an important and necessary part of the Code. I'm happy to do so.
Right, that closes that matter. We now come to the urgent question. I'll just let the ministers go who need to get away. Right, urgent questions. Alicia Cairns.
Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for an update on the situation in Kosovo.
Minister, welcome.
Mr. Speaker, the latest spike in tensions in northern Kosovo is deeply concerning. Violent protests in northern Kosovo on the 29th of May resulted in injuries to at least 30 troops from NATO's KFOR mission, along with 50 civilians, including journalists. Since then, the mood has calmed slightly, but tensions remain high. Daily protests are continuing around municipal offices in the 4 Kosovo Serb-majority municipalities, where Kosovan authorities are insisting that newly elected ethnic Albanian mayors should work and be based. Mr. Speaker, we are working closely with international partners to de-escalate the situation and encourage a return to dialogue. On the 18th of May, along with the United States, France, Germany, Italy and the EU, we called for work towards a long-term solution for representative democracy in these municipalities in northern Kosovo. We also warned against the use of force or actions which might heighten tensions. On the 26th of May, we expressed strong concerns at the move to install mayors in municipal buildings by force and Serbia's raising of the state of its forces' readiness at the border. We are urging the government of Kosovo to withdraw special police forces from the immediate vicinity of the municipal buildings and allow mayors to discharge their functions from alternative locations. The Prime Minister's Western Balkans Special Envoy, Lord Peach, visited Kosovo on the 30th of May, where he met political leaders, the KFOR commander and other key actors. Alongside France, Germany, Italy, the US and the EU, we have raised strong concerns with Serbia's President Vučić and urged moves to de-escalate. The Foreign Secretary will meet Serbia's Prime Minister Brnabić in coming days. We welcome all efforts to chart a path forward towards de-escalation and dialogue and are playing an active part in international efforts to this end. The Prime Minister reiterated this message when he met Kosovo President Osmani at the EPC summit on the 1st of June, as did Lord Peach during his visit to Kosovo. Managing down current tensions is a first and necessary step towards this goal. We support the call made by France, Germany and the EU on the 1st of June for fresh, inclusive municipal elections and work to establish the Association of Serb-majority municipalities. We welcome the initiative and current follow-up by the EU Special Representative Lajčák and his US counterpart Escobar in the region for meetings today.
Mr. Cairns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this important urgent question. Kosovo is often faced with a cycle of escalatory and de-escalatory violence on its streets. I want to set the context here in that Kosovo is not Serbia. But earlier this year, Belgrade orchestrated a boycott of democratic elections. As a result that we recognise in the West, and yet now we're asking them to rerun it, there was only a 3% turnout. That was due to foreign interference, which seems to be missing so often from the discussion. Last week, elected mayors did seek to take up their roles, not in a violent manner. It became violent due to the orchestrated violence around the mayoral offices. And whilst I recognise this was an escalatory action, it would not be. Should hostile forces take control of a mayoral office in the UK, we would not say, well, you just need to go and work from home. We would say this is an unacceptable attempt to suffocate democracy. We then saw orchestrated violence on the streets by Belgrade-funded and armed militias against KFOR and the police. There were Molotov cocktails, there was firing of guns against them, there was setting on fire of police cars. So can I please ask my right honourable friend, why was there such a disproportionate and unbalanced response by our allies? It is wrong that the US and EU chose to attack Kosovo with no criticism of the armed militias who created the situation. A democratic ally bore the brunt of those sticks. Secondly, what countermeasures are we putting in place with Belgrade? Because at the moment it appears to be a failure of deterrence diplomacy. How does our policy differ from the US and the EU? Because we are too quiet on what is happening right now. And can we finally call out these Belgrade armed and funded militias who, when an individual says, no, I don't want to support your militia, finds a grenade outside their child's doorstep the next day? This is intimidation in its worst sense. And finally, how are we supporting Serb Kosovan communities in the north to make sure they can live the lives they want and they can participate in democracy without foreign interference having a chilling effect on democracy in Kosovo?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend, the chair of the Select Committee, for raising this matter today. This is an area of policy she has followed closely, and the House will recognise her expertise in this matter. I want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that the government is exercising a very responsible role in this matter. It's a part of the world, as she knows, that we know extremely well. We emphasise the importance of dialogue. We emphasise the importance of de-escalation. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, had a chance to mention these matters when he met the President of Kosovo on the 1st of June. And my honourable friend for Aldershot, the Minister with specific responsibilities for this part of the world, had visited both Kosovo and Serbia in mid-December. So I hope that she will feel that we are trying to de-escalate the situation. I know that our ambassador is speaking to her, I think, later today, and I hope that she will be reassured by what he and I am saying about the contribution that Britain is making.
We have the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The situation in northern Kosovo is extremely precarious and warrants the urgent attention of this House. Last week, 30 NATO peacekeepers and more than 50 Serbian protesters were injured. Labour pays tribute to the NATO mission and, of course, our troops, and condemns all actions that raise tension, lead to violence and undermine efforts towards normalisation. In January, I visited Kosovo. Its people remain hugely grateful for the NATO intervention in 1999, led by the then Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and President Clinton, which brought bloody violence not witnessed on European soil for decades to a halt. We're proud of our historic actions, but it's crucial Britain plays its part now too. We must remain focused on de-escalation and the re-establishment of constructive dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade. To uphold the sovereignty of both Kosovo and Serbia, ensure the rights of minorities on both sides of the border, and protect democracy. This matters for the strategic interests of our whole continent. We must seek difficult conversations today to avoid further violence and escalation tomorrow. Labour is committed to that, and that's why I visited earlier in the year when tensions began to rise. But despite our historic role, the UK has all too often been absent from the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary's diaries, despite the important work of the UK envoy, absent from actions to prevent interference in the region from bad actors like Russia, who have been sowing the seeds of discord in the region, and most crucially, absent from the EU-led dialogue process. Does the UK support the rerunning of elections in these 4 municipalities? And does the Minister agree that Kosovo Serbs should be expected to take part? Does he share my serious concerns that the Serbian armed forces have been placed on the highest alert? And can I ask the Minister why no UK Foreign Secretary has visited Kosovo since 2016? Mr. Speaker, it is time the UK remembers its historic role in the region and urgently starts to show some leadership.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Shadow Foreign Secretary for his contribution, and he, of course, is emphasising the significant British involvement and the importance of this region, both to Europe and in particular to the United Kingdom. In respect of his question about the Foreign Secretary visiting, I should point out that the Minister, the Honourable Member for Aldershot, was both in Kosovo and Serbia at the end of last year, and that as recently as the 1st of June, the Prime Minister had a brush-by with the President of Kosovo. Can I agree with what he said about the appalling attack on the forces from NATO? We have condemned that attack on the troops without qualification. Can I also emphasise that additional Turkish troops will be now joining, and as he will know, there were serious casualties amongst Hungarian and Italian soldiers. So I join with him in what he said about that. We are working very closely, Mr. Speaker, with our Quint partners to secure the rapid de-escalation of the violence. As Lord Peach, the Prime Minister's envoy, has said, the UK stood by Kosovo in the best and worst of times and will continue to do so. And in respect of the elections that took place, we are clear that they are legal, but it does look as if they lack legitimacy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend agree with me that Kosovo has not been absent from my interests over the last few months? And will he further agree with me that lawyers have now been appointed, distinguished international lawyers, have been appointed by the Council of Europe to take Kosovo's membership forward further? And the question that I have for him is, how will he ensure that the Serbs at this time participate in those elections?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his comments. He also knows much about the issues that the House is discussing today. The UK supports Kosovo's wish to join the Council of Europe, and I can tell the House that the Council of Ministers have referred the matter to the Parliamentary Assembly, so I hope that that will proceed in the manner that he and I hope it will.
Lord Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I saw for myself the work of NATO KFOR troops when I visited Kosovo on a cross-party delegation last year. Their work is really important, but I don't think it carries the significance it should do in national capitals, including here in London. So can I ask the Minister to put more emphasis in building on the UK's unique position that we have as an ally of Kosovo, looking ahead to next year in 2024 with the 25th anniversary of the NATO-led intervention, that how we can use the goodwill, the substantial goodwill, probably the country in Europe that has the most amount of goodwill towards the United Kingdom at present, to how we can bring about a greater understanding between communities and a de-escalation of the dangerous rhetoric that is coming from Belgrade, with potential involvement from Russia as well. It's not a coincidence that this is all happening at the same time, I fear. So what can the Minister do to really use our position, rather than just be a commentator, be a participant in finding a solution?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his perceptive and accurate comments. I can reassure him that we will do everything we possibly can to advance the aims which he set out, and I underline the point that he made about Britain having a unique contribution to offer in all of this. And I will ensure that his comments are relayed both to the Foreign Secretary and to my honourable friend for Aldershot. But he may rest assured that the essence of what he is saying is precisely in line with the policy of His Majesty's government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Prime Minister's trade envoy to the Western Balkans, both Serbia and Kosovo fall within my brief. And I recognise the importance of stability in the area if we are to encourage UK businesses to take advantage of the great opportunities that exist there. And I fully support my honourable friend's comments about de-escalation. Only if we reduce the tension can British businesses look to that area to benefit the economies of both Serbia, Kosovo and the wider region. Could I urge my right honourable friend to do all he can to, as he said, de-escalate the situation?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable friend on behalf of the House for all the work he does in his role as an envoy, and to underline the important point that he made about steps, Mr. Speaker, towards de-escalation. Both Kosovo and Serbia have a role to play in de-escalation. Kosovo must now enable mayors to work from locations outside municipal offices and withdraw special police units from the vicinity. Serbia needs to reverse its decision to raise the level of readiness of its armed forces at the border with Kosovo and use its influence to encourage an end to the violent protests, and all parties must exercise maximum restraint, avoiding inflammatory rhetoric and actions. I know, Mr. Speaker, that this is the essence of what my honourable friend, with his experience of this part of the world and these specific issues, is calling for, and I strongly agree with what he has said.
SNP spokesperson Dr Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We all agree with the UK Government's joint statement in condemning the violence. No one in this House, or indeed any part of the Parliament, wants to see a return to the terrible violence of the 1990s. We all agree in the need for de-escalation, but what actions is the UK Government taking precisely to achieve that de-escalation, as opposed to just words? What investigation is the Foreign Office undertaking on the involvement of Belgrade and possibly the Kremlin in manipulation and misinformation around the elections that led to such a poor turnout? Prime Minister Kurti has said he is open to rerunning the elections to try and establish support and legitimacy. But should these go ahead, what actions would the Foreign Office and the embassy officials take to assure these go ahead safely and that both communities take part? And finally, the recent agreements of just February and March, what actions are they taking to bring those to fruition and establish the association of Serbian majority municipalities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady very much for what she's had to say. I want to reassure her that we are not in any way naively equating the two sides. She asked at the beginning of her question about the action we were taking to deter the violence, and we view the attacks on KFOR personnel as completely unacceptable. We've been clear in Belgrade that attacks on NATO personnel are unacceptable, and any claims that KFOR attacked peaceful protesters are completely unfounded. And many of those responsible for attacking KFOR troops were not peaceful protesters. They came with the means and intent to pursue violence. And as far as her comments are concerned about the activities of the Russians, the British government, along with its allies, particularly those in the Quint, is acutely aware of the issues to which she is referring.
Check the press day.
Speaker, could I ask for a bit more detail from my honourable friend about what his department is actually doing to oppose Russian attempts at destabilisation in the Western Balkans?
Well, my honourable friend will, I hope, allow me not to go ahead of ourselves in respect of the specific details of that, but his point is noted.
Wayne David.
Mr. Speaker, in this region, there is, as we all know, a hidden agenda being pursued by Russia and its supporters. But at this precise moment, would you agree with me that what is needed is a real huge effort to de-escalate the situation? The former UN Special Envoy to the Balkans, former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt, has called for an unprecedented, quote, robust diplomacy to be exercised by the United States, by the European Union and by the United Kingdom. Would he agree that that must be the priority at this precise moment?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his contribution and for reinforcing the wise words of Carl Bildt. And in terms of the specific issue he is raising, that is very much at the top of the agenda of the Quint.
Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kosovo is a much valued and very active member of the International Religious Freedom of Belief Alliance, which I chair. And it's my privilege to work with their representative on the alliance on a very regular basis. And indeed, there are countries in the region who are also members of the alliance. Would the honourable member indicate how other means can be used to strengthen diplomatic relationships between countries in the region and so de-escalate tensions?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for all the work she does in this area, and which the House has acknowledged on many previous occasions. In terms of the last part of what she has said, I would say that the work of Lord Peach is particularly helpful in trying to achieve that, and the whole House will want to thank Lord Peach for the work that he is doing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister has acknowledged, the whole world will be watching for the UK's response, not only for the impact it will have in Kosovo, but for the whole of the wider region in the Balkans. The comments about the legitimacy of the elections are welcome, and also de-escalating Serbia's military heightened alert are also welcomed. Can the Minister say further what the UK is doing to strengthen civil society within Kosovo, those bringers of peace, women's groups and other organisations who are working for peace alongside military and diplomatic means as well?
I thank her very much for her comments, and in respect of her question, the Embassy, on behalf of the Foreign Office and the Government, runs a range of programmes which engage very specifically with civil society, and we will be looking to see whether there is more that we can do to energise the excellent work that they are already doing.
Oh, Jim Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his response? 30 peacekeepers, 52 Serbs who were injured and when they were protesting against the installation of the mayor being in place. NATO has also announced that it will send additional troops on the top of the 700 already there. Everyone recognises that NATO has a key peace role to play. Can the Minister perhaps indicate what exactly the position will be for those peacekeepers, that they will be respected by both sides? Ever mindful as well, it's always the innocents who suffer the most. It's the women, the children and the elderly. So what discussion has government had with officials in Kosovo to reduce any possibility of an escalation of violence and to protect the civilians who are key to all this way of going forward? Thank you.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for, as usual, his perceptive comments about what is going on, and in particular his focus on the abhorrence of violence committed against the peacekeepers in the way that he described. He may rest assured that Britain, through a whole series of different international as well as local entities, is doing everything it can to protect those peacekeepers from these vile attacks, and we will continue to do exactly that.
That completes the urgent question. I'll let everybody leave who wishes to leave. Before I come to the statement, can I just say to the Home Secretary, I'm going to say to the Shadow Home Secretary, are you happy to continue, or do you want me to suspend to give you time to read it?
Mr. Speaker, I have only received the statement at past. If it was possible to have a further 10 minutes, that would be appreciated, but I don't want to inconvenience the House. Unfortunately, we have become used to these late statements from the Home Office.
I understand it was read, but unfortunately, in fairness to the Home Secretary, I'm aware that it thought that we'd received it. Was very late coming to me. I've not had time to look at it. You've not been given sufficient time. And the Home Secretary said, unfortunately, it was read. It just didn't arrive to our office. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to suspend for 10 minutes to give you time to read. Let us come to the statement. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement about the progress of the government's plan to stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, this is a complex and enduring problem which we must tackle on multiple fronts. It is also a moral imperative. That is why the Prime Minister, unlike the Leader of the Opposition, made stopping the boats one of his 5 pledges to the British people. And while Labour has no plan, Mr. Speaker, we are getting on with our plan to stop the boats. While there is a long way to go, there are several outcomes to note. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the Small Boats Operational Command was established in December to oversee operations in the Channel, with a new Senior Director, Duncan Capps, a former general, appointed to lead it. We have doubled the funding for Operation Invigour over the next 2 financial years, which brings together the National Crime Agency, Home Office Intelligence and policing to help disrupt the people smuggling gangs upstream. Secondly, by freeing up immigration enforcement officers, illegal working raids increased by more than 50% between January and March this year compared to the same period in 2022. Since the introduction of the Nationality and Borders Act in June 2022, immigration enforcement have doubled the number of arrests, charges and convictions compared to the same period in the preceding year. We have established the UK's first cross-government ministerial task force on immigration enforcement so that only those here lawfully can work, receive benefits or access public services. Meanwhile, data sharing with the financial sector recommenced in April as we crack down on illegal migrants accessing banking services. Third, the asylum initial decision backlog is down by 17,000, and we are on track to abolish all legacy cases by the end of this year, having doubled the number of asylum decision makers over the last 2 years. We continue to improve the system and aim to boost the productivity of caseworkers by simplifying the process with shorter interviews and removing unnecessary steps. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, the current accommodation system is unsustainable and hugely unfair to taxpayers. We recently set out to this House our plans for a fairer, more cost-effective asylum accommodation system, starting with former MOD sites, Wethersfield and Scampton. We will see an accommodation barge arrive in Portland within the next fortnight, and we have secured another 2 to accommodate another 1,000 individuals. We're also making more efficient use of hotels by asking people to share rooms where appropriate. Fifth, Mr. Speaker, on the international front, we have signed the biggest ever small boats bilateral deal with France and strengthened cooperation with a range of other European partners, including Belgium, Italy, and the EU. In 2023, so far, more small boat migrants have been intercepted by France than have reached the UK's shores. French interceptions this year are more than double what they were 2 years ago. Additional drones, aircraft, and other surveillance technologies will be deployed to support French law enforcement. French forces have increased the proportion of small boat launches that are prevented and arrested more than 200 people smugglers so far this year. As part of the New Deal, France will establish a new 24/7 zonal coordination centre in Lille, including permanently embedded British officers. Now, my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, was in France last week to see firsthand the impact of UK funding and to discuss joint plans to intensify our engagement on the Channel as we move into summer. Sixth, Mr. Speaker, the government continues to prioritise the return of individuals with no right to remain in the United Kingdom. We established, through the Nationality and Borders Act, a disqualification from modern slavery protection for individuals who meet specific criteria, including foreign national offenders with custodial sentences of 12 months or more, and individuals convicted of terrorist offences. Between January and March of this year, over 4,000 people with no right to be in the UK were removed or departed voluntarily, an increase of over 50% compared to the same period last year. We recently signed the UK-Georgia readmissions agreement and have made significant progress with our returns relationship with Pakistan. We are also continuing to progress our returns relationship with India following implementation of our migration and mobility partnership. And since the Prime Minister signed a joint communique with Prime Minister Rama in December, nearly 1,800 Albanian nationals without the right to be in the UK have been returned to Albania. We are not complacent, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to monitor this as we enter the summer, but the number of Albanians arriving by small boats so far this year is almost 90% less than in the same period last year. Last month, we delivered a groundbreaking new arrangement whereby Albanian prisoners will be sent home to serve the remainder of their jail sentences. Seventh, Mr. Speaker, we continue to prepare to deliver the government's migration and economic development partnership with Rwanda. This partnership is an innovative international solution to an international problem. The Home Office has always maintained that this policy is lawful, and the UK High Court upheld this in December 2022. Legal proceedings are ongoing, but we are committed to delivering this policy and getting flights going as soon as legally practicable. I visited Kigali in March and saw that Rwanda is more than ready to help people thrive in a new country. These efforts demonstrate our commitment to doing all that we can within the existing legislative framework. But we've also been clear that to stop the boats, we must go further, and that the framework needs to change. And that's why, lastly, Mr. Speaker, we are reforming our laws. This is what the public wants, and all politicians should get behind our bill. Our illegal migration bill will make clear to anyone coming here illegally that they will not be able to build a life in this country. Instead, they will be liable to be detained and will be swiftly removed either to their home country or relocated to a safe third country like Rwanda. This is the deterrent factor we need to break the people smugglers' business model. We will introduce new safe and legal routes for those at risk of war and persecution to come to seek refuge and protection in the UK within an annual quota to be set by Parliament and informed by consultation with local communities. Mr. Speaker, the British people are generous and welcoming, but they rightly expect immigration to be controlled. Coming here illegally from other safe countries is unnecessary, unsafe, and unfair. It must stop. We have a long way still to go, and we are not complacent. But unlike the benches opposite, we have a plan. We are delivering that plan, and we will not rest until we stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, may I just say before I finish, I want to put on record my apology to the opposition for the late delivery of the statement. And with that, I commend the statement to the House.
Secretary of State to Beck Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your response, and thank the Home Secretary for her apology. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister flew to Dover today to congratulate himself and to tell us that his plan is working, even though the asylum backlog he promised to clear is at a record high. Decisions are down, caseworkers have dropped, hotel use is up, returns are still down. Only 1% of last year's small boat cases have been processed, and 7,500 people arrived on dangerous small boats in the last few months alone. The massive gap between the Tories' rhetoric and reality shows the Home Secretary still has no grip on the system, and this Conservative chaos is letting everyone down. The Prime Minister claims today he is stopping the boats, but the 7,600 people who've arrived in the last few months alone is 3 times higher than 2 years ago and 8 times higher than before the pandemic. All of us hope the limited reduction in the winter months compared to last year will be sustained when the weather improves. But criminal gangs have already made an estimated £30 million in the last few months alone from putting lives at risk and undermining our border security as a result of the Conservative failures to go after the gangs and maintain that border security. The Home Secretary boasted about an increase in enforcement, but compared to the COVID period, compared to before the pandemic, enforcement visits are down 22% and arrests are down 17%. This is not an achievement. The Home Secretary also says that she's cut the backlog, but the backlog is up at a record high 170,000. It has gone up, not down, since December. There's been an 18% drop in asylum decisions in the last quarter, and it's no good claiming that they are only clearing a so-called legacy backlog of cases from before June of last year. What about the growing backlog of 60,000 people and more who've arrived in the last 12 months? They're still in the asylum system, still in hotels, still in limbo. A backlog is a backlog, no matter how much they try to spin it away. The only legacy we are talking about is the legacy of Tory failure to tackle the problem. In fact, all the Home Secretary has managed to do is take a few decisions on cases that are more than a year old. That is not an achievement, that is her job. The Prime Minister and Home Secretary promised to end hotel use, but it has gone up to 47,000 people, higher than the 40,000 the Home Secretary told us about in December. The Prime Minister also said in December he'd already got locations for accommodating 10,000 more people, but now the Home Secretary says it's only 3,000 from the end of this year. And what she hasn't admitted is this isn't instead of hotels, it is additional because of their failure and the consequence of their new immigration bill, the bigger backlog bill, which is just going to make the backlog worse, because today's press release reveals the truth. It says that these accommodation changes could, quote, could reduce the need to source an additional 90 hotels. An additional 90 hotels. Why are they in such a mess? They need to be thinking about sourcing an additional 90 hotels. Why have they so totally lost any grip that the backlog and costs are getting worse and worse? On returns too, enforced returns are actually lower than pre-pandemic, and of the 24,000 people the government has now tried to return to safe countries they've travelled through, only 23 people have actually been returned, and even for Albania, where there is a return agreement, 12,000 people arrived on small boats last year, but less than 1% of those cases have been decided and barely a few hundred people have been returned. As for Rwanda, as my honourable friend has said, the government has actually sent more Home Secretaries than asylum seekers, and no one expects those numbers to be high. The taxpayer is already footing the bill for Conservative failure. Now we hear reports the new legislation will cost £6 billion. Is that true? Yes or no? The Home Office has already had to claim £2.4 billion extra from the Treasury Reserve. How much more will they claim this year? The Times reports illegal immigration will have to fall below 10,000 a year if the new legislation it's even possible to be implemented, because the Home Office says that ministers' plans are, quote, based on demented assumptions. So can she tell us whether the demented assumptions are hers or the Prime Minister's? Time and again, the government's voted against Labour proposals to help stop dangerous crossings, voted against action to go after the criminal gangs, voted against the cross-border police unit, voted against fast-track decisions for safe countries, and voted against new return agreements and legal routes with Europe. People want to see a strong border security and properly controlled and managed asylum system, so our country does our bit alongside others to help those fleeing persecution and conflict. Under the Tories, we have neither, because the gangs have been allowed to go rip across the borders and the asylum system is in chaos. All we get is rhetoric. Rhetoric while the reality gets worse, demented assumptions, unworkable plans, empty spin. Instead of all the press conferences, we need a proper plan. The asylum system is broken. They broke it, and there is still no plan today to sort it out.
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Lady again for her extensive words. The theatrics gets even more colourful every time we meet, I have to say. And I say words because, as ever, that's all you get from the opposition. No serious alternatives, no credible plan, just empty rhetoric and endless noise. Mr. Speaker, last December, the Prime Minister and I set out a plan to stop the boats. Since then, we've been working flat out to deliver that programme. What has the Right Honourable Lady been up to? It's hard to say, Mr. Speaker. The question is, will Labour ever bring forward a plan of their own, a plan with details, a plan that delivers? The answer is, I'm sorry to say, they don't have a plan, and they actually don't care that they don't have a plan. It's this Conservative government and this Conservative Prime Minister that's dealing with the priorities of the British people. So what is Labour actually doing? They're very good. They're very good at carping from the sidelines. But when it comes down to it, Mr. Speaker, how do they actually act? They voted against every single measure that we've put forward to stop the boats. They would scrap our world-leading plan with Rwanda. And they continue to oppose our laws to detain and remove. Contrast that opposition to our common sense proposals with their very urgent activism when it suits them. Because let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, over 100 of the MPs on the benches opposite, over half of the Parliamentary Labour Party, signed a letter campaigning for dangerous foreign criminals to be spared deportation. Those criminals included murderers and rapists who went on to commit further terrible crimes here in Britain. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, 14 of the current shadow cabinet campaigned to stop these vile criminals from being deported. Among them, the shadow Foreign Secretary, the shadow Attorney General, the shadow Health Secretary, even the Leader of the Opposition. I'll spare the rest. I'm still waiting for an apology, Mr. Speaker. I fear it will never come. Now, I note that the Right Honourable Lady didn't sign that letter. Perhaps that should be taken into account by the Leader of the Opposition before he decides to remove her from the front bench. And they continue to oppose our illegal migration bill, saying it won't work. Frankly, it's totally unsurprising. It's because, unlike the British people, the Labour Party wants more migration, not less. They want open borders, not control. Mr. Speaker, I'm a Democrat. The British people have spoken clearly and repeatedly. They welcome genuine refugees and do not want people to come here illegally. The opposition parties and the Right Honourable Lady are supremely indifferent to this problem. They are happy with a status quo that lines the pockets of the gangsters, is lethally dangerous, grossly unfair on taxpayers, and an intolerable pressure on our local communities. On this side of the House, we are committed to stopping the boats. We have a plan to do so, and we are delivering that plan.
Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Home Secretary will know I'm a big supporter of the hard work she's been doing to sort this crisis out, but sharing rooms and barges and drones and relying on the French is not the answer. I think we all know, anybody with any common sense in this place know what the answer is, and that's to get the flights off to Rwanda as quick as possible. So could you please advise me and the great people of Ashford when these flights will go ahead?
Home Secretary.
Well, I have huge confidence in our world-leading plan with Rwanda. As my honourable friend will know, that plan was endorsed by the High Court in legal challenge at the end of last year. It was, we've now had a Court of Appeal hearing. We await judgment from the court, and as soon as we complete the full legal process, we will ensure that flights take off as soon as possible.
Peace spokesperson Alison Thulas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Home Secretary comes here with selective statistics built to suit the press release that she wants to put out. But the reality is the total asylum backlog has increased by over 40,000 people since this time last year. And there are now fewer decision makers in the Home Office in May than there were in January. It's all distraction and it's all sleight of hand. And there is no evidence that their plans so far have had any impact or that the heavy-handed deterrence works. based, as her own officials say, on demented assumptions. And policies like the hostile environment, started by Labour and turbocharged by successive Tory Home Secretaries, the Nationality and Borders Act, the Rwanda Plan, deals with Albania, the illegal migration bill. None of this is working because the central fact remains that people are coming here in small boats because they are desperate and they have no other choice. The latest ONS figures from May show that just 54 Afghans were resettled under Pathway 1 of the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme since August 2021. There's been 40 under Pathway 2 and only 14 under Pathway 3. And at the same time, 8,429 Afghans arrived in the UK on small boats. They are coming because they can't get here to safety any other way. Now, where I will agree slightly with the Home Secretary's in her statement that the accommodation system she's using is unsustainable and unfair, and it's also absolutely brutal for asylum seekers waiting indefinitely, as so many of my own constituents have been. Yet the Home Secretary proposes to throw yet more money, £6 billion reportedly, at private providers and prison ships, instead of tackling the real problem, which is the outstanding backlog she has created. With no thought to the trauma and the stress which caused incidents like the Park Inn incident in my constituency and has led to reported suicides of those stuck waiting under her incompetence. At Napier Barracks, sharing spaces caused the spread of infectious disease and had a really significant impact on mental health. So can I ask what safeguarding consultation she has done on the proposal to share hotel rooms with total strangers? How will she ensure that people from rival factions don't get put in a room together, which could be incredibly dangerous? Will she fast-track Afghans, Syrians, Eritreans, Sudanese and Iranians who have a very high grant rate? Let them work and contribute as they so dearly want to do. And will she accept that all she has done so far is make life significantly worse for some of the most vulnerable and most brutalised people in the world?
Hear, hear. Well, I refute the characterisation that the Honourable Lady puts forward. I'm very proud of this government's track record for welcoming hundreds of thousands of vulnerable people from across the globe over several years through schemes which have offered them sanctuary. That is a track record of which we can be incredibly proud. But I would gently say to the Honourable Lady that the SNP's criticism is frankly astonishing. They talk piously about wanting to provide more sanctuary despite doing virtually nothing at all to help. As we've said before, there are almost as many contingency hotels in Kensington as in the whole of Scotland. The truth is the SNP are all talk and no action, and until they get real, I really have to question the seriousness on this subject.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome the statement from the Home Secretary. This is progress, which I hope will accelerate at pace. But could I ask the Secretary of State to investigate a recent incident, a boat crossing, in which it is alleged that the French border force cooperated with the British border force, but is in so doing escorted a boat from French territorial waters to the British border force. I'm assuming this is not the kind of cooperation she was alluding to earlier. Thank you.
Home Secretary.
Well, I will look into the incident to which my honourable friend refers, but on the whole, we are seeing improvement and very positive collaboration with our colleagues in France. For example, for the first time, we now have embedded border force officials working side by side with the French counterparts, and we are seeing that the French are preventing more crossings than previously. There's a long way to go, but there is some improvement.
Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I ask about those who are seeking sanctuary, as the Home Secretary referred to, because Uganda has just passed the most virulently and appallingly homophobic legislation, which not only outlies homosexual sex, but also outlies promoting homosexuality or allowing your premises to be used for homosexuality. 34 countries in Africa have made homosexuality illegal. If somebody comes to the UK, by whatever means, lands on these shores, and seeks asylum because they are Ugandan and because of their sexuality, will she grant them sanctuary?
Every application for asylum is determined on its
own merits in conjunction with consideration of human rights laws, international conventions and our domestic laws. So depending on the circumstances of the case, all applications for asylum are considered.
You won't even say yes about Uganda.
John Redwood.
If we reduced the waiting time from, say, a year to 3 months when making a decision on an illegal migrant, wouldn't that cut the accommodation and other public service costs by 3/4 and relieve a lot of the pressure? What is a reasonable time to come to a conclusion about whether someone is illegal and shouldn't stay or are welcome here and can get a job?
Home Secretary.
Well, this is why I am encouraged by the progress we're making on our initial decision backlog. Those are cases preceding last summer where people have been waiting for many months, in some cases years, for a decision on their asylum application. It's absolutely essential that we bear down on that backlog, we shorten the time that people are waiting for a decision, and fundamentally we reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If the Home Secretary's approach was cruel but effective, at least it would be effective. If it was generous and well-meaning but was accidentally leading to too many people coming here, at least it would have the merit of being generous. But the Home Secretary's entire approach has been both cruel and hopelessly, woefully ineffective. When she comes here making a statement and the reality is actually the backlog is increasing, why should anyone watching this statement have any confidence that she's got a grip on this situation?
Well, as I said, we've set out the progress that we've made on all aspects of the plan, and what I would gently say to the honourable gentleman is to consult with his constituents. Because I tell you, the vast majority of the British people support this government's plan to stop the boats. They back this government to tackle illegal migration, and they want to see a response. I only wish he would get behind them too.
Jack Burton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, increasing capacity for deportation and processing overseas is key for dealing with illegal migration. So will my right honourable friend update the House, in addition to Rwanda, what more is being done to increase this capacity?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right that the processing of asylum claims is absolutely fundamental to bearing down on the backlog, reducing the number of people accommodated in hotels, costing us £6 million a day right now. And that's why I'm very pleased that we've increased the number of caseworkers who are making these decisions. We've improved the process and made it more efficient and speedier so that we can make progress with bearing down on the asylum backlog and ensure that we save money for the taxpayer, but ultimately fix this challenge with illegal migration.
Joanna Cherry.
Deputy Speaker, can I just take the Home Secretary back to the point made about Afghan asylum seekers by my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow Central? As she said, the latest ONS figures show that only 108 have been resettled under Pathways 1, 2 and 3 since the fall of Kabul nearly 2 years ago. And at the same time, 8,429 Afghans arrived in the UK by small boat in the year ending March 2023, as compared to 2,466 in the year earlier. Can't the Home Secretary see that the absence of functioning, safe and legal routes means that many eligible Afghans to whom the United Kingdom owes a debt of honour, including war veterans, feel that they've got no choice but to use small boats to get here? And can't she acknowledge that it's Home Office intransigence under the Afghan schemes that's pushing these vulnerable Afghans, as I say, some of them veterans, to come here by small boats?
I disagree. I'm very proud of the high number of Afghans who have been resettled and welcomed into the United Kingdom. Between 2015 and 2022, almost 50,000 people have been resettled or relocated, of which over 21,000 were through the Afghan schemes, the ACRS and ARAP, and over 28,000 were through established resettlement schemes relating to other countries. So I think that is a good track record. There is a high number of people coming from those countries where there are troubles, but the simple truth is this: there is never a good reason to pay a people smuggling gang to embark on a lethal journey and to take this illegal crossing over the Channel to get to the UK.
Teresa Villiers.
I welcome this real progress on gripping this problem of illegal small boats crossing, but can I ask the Home Secretary, does she share my alarm that 70 Labour MPs signed a letter to stop the deportation of foreign criminals, some of whom went on to commit serious further offences?
Unfortunately, my honourable friend makes a very powerful point. It says it all. It says it all about Labour Party policy. Quick to campaign against common sense measures to deport dangerous foreign criminals, slow to support our measures to stop the boats. I'm still waiting for the apology, and I'll keep you updated on my progress on that front.
Roshanara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary will be aware of what happened last week in Whitechapel in my constituency and Westminster. It was all over the press. Asylum seekers were being dumped by Clear Springs, the agency that her government has appointed. She's spending £7 million a day, and yet these people were left in the streets because the accommodation wasn't suitable. The local authority and I have sought information to work with the Home Office, with this agency, to make sure it's done properly so that the far right doesn't target our community, which has happened in the past, and she has failed to get a grip. The examples of what we've experienced with people sleeping rough in the streets because she's paying companies that are not providing the accommodation is scandalous, and she should be ashamed of the record of that company, and she should take the contract off them and give it to agencies that can accommodate people in our communities. Otherwise, she's creating unrest in local communities up and down the country, and she will be responsible for that.
Secretary.
Well, we are, as I announced, we are making progress on delivering alternative and more appropriate accommodation for asylum seekers. Those under our care are made appropriate offers of accommodation, and it's right, it's fair and it's reasonable that we maximise the accommodation within legal limits so that we get value for money for the taxpayer, but we also offer a safe form of accommodation to the asylum seekers.
Nikki Aiken.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement. We saw the consequences of illegal immigration last week when 40 asylum seekers were refused to share rooms in a hotel in Pimlico in my constituency. I'd like to put on record my thanks to the local councillors Jim Glenn, Ed Pitford and Jackie Wilkinson, who worked with me to liaise with the Home Office and the Council to ensure that the matter was resolved quickly. Could the Home Secretary confirm whether Westminster City Council was informed that the hotel was to be used, as the leader of the Council has claimed it wasn't, and would she agree to meet with me to discuss this incident and to discuss whether central London hotels are suitable to house asylum seekers in this way, as they tend to be much smaller and more expensive for the British taxpayer?
Home Secretary.
Well, I want to thank my honourable friend for all of her work for her local constituents, handling this very challenging matter. There's a very high number of asylum seekers in her constituency, and I'm very cognizant of that. The individuals in question were properly notified of the changes to their accommodation, and they were offered appropriate accommodation at all times in the timeline. We work, our contractors work very closely with the local authorities who are supporting asylum seekers all over the country, and I'm very pleased to meet with her, and if not me, the Immigration Minister. We will definitely liaise with her more closely going forward.
Tanmajit Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has made a migration media statement today off the back of half-baked statistics, not even based on the usual full quarter. And the Home Secretary is too busy on manoeuvres for the Tory party leadership to be doing her job properly. Now, originally, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister both promised that they would clear the backlog by the end of this year. But now that definition has somehow cunningly shifted to clearing the legacy backlog. Now, is that change, Home Secretary, anything to do with the fact that less than 20% of cases have been cleared so far this year?
Secretary.
The honourable gentleman really needs to pay more attention, if, with respect. The Prime Minister made clear when he set out our plan the goal, and that was to reduce the initial decision backlog. It stood at about 90,000 at the time of his statement, and it's come down by a considerable amount as of today. We're making steady progress. If we continue on this trajectory and with the measures that we're putting in place, we are on track to eliminate that backlog, and I look forward to updating him when we do so.
Tom Hunt.
Speaker, I think a number of my constituents found the demonstration outside of Pimlico Hotel quite peculiar. I think if these were genuine refugees, I'd be very grateful that the British taxpayer is paying for them to be put up in the hotel at all, not demanding en-suite singles. In terms of the Nove Hotel in Ipswich, which continues to have a negative impact on the economy of Ipswich. Ipswich Town have just been promoted, good news, but it does mean the need for hotel accommodation has increased. Hospitality sector is excited about promotion, but actually the need to get the Nove Hotel back into use as a proper hotel to support the town is more vital than ever. Could the Home Secretary get close to outlining a timeline for when hotels such as the Nove Hotel will be put back to their proper use?
Home Secretary.
Our goal is to significantly reduce the use of hotels for asylum seekers. That's why we've announced several sites around the country whereby we are rolling out bespoke accommodation, which is much more appropriate for asylum seekers, much fairer to the taxpayer, and better all round. I can't give him the timeline that he wants, but I'm very encouraged by the sites that we are and the barges that we are going to be rolling out to accommodate asylum seekers in the near future.
Daisy Cooper.
Deputy Speaker, it's not just that the government has broken the immigration system, but in so doing they have destroyed trust with local authorities and communities in their heavy-handed and chaotic approach in the way that they have placed asylum seekers around the country, and now they are hemorrhaging taxpayers' money. The Liberal Democrats have said time and time again that the Home Secretary should scrap the unworkable, expensive and immoral Rwanda scheme and spend that money instead on recruiting people into the Home Office to process claims and to reduce the backlog. Why on earth is she refusing to take this pragmatic, sensible approach?
Secretary.
I'm very disappointed by the tone that the Honourable Lady adopts when talking about Rwanda. I've been to Rwanda. I've met with our partners in Rwanda, and I am very encouraged and grateful and impressed by the cooperation that our partners in Rwanda are extending to the United Kingdom in helping us with this very, very challenging problem of illegal migration. I'm afraid her views are based on outdated and frankly ignorant assumptions about Rwanda, and I really encourage her to review them.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to welcome the statement from the Home Secretary and welcome the fall in the number of people arriving illegally. But I'd like to question her further on her statement that the use of RAF Scampton is, she described it as fairer and more cost-effective. But who is it fairer to? Is it fairer to the asylum seekers themselves, left in a remote rural location? Is it fairer to the many veterans in my constituency who are very concerned about the heritage? Or is it fairer to the wider Lincolnshire population who may now miss out on a £300 million investment in the Scampton site?
Secretary.
I want to put on record my gratitude to everybody in the local community of RAF Scampton, and I understand that it is a challenging situation for those communities and indeed the local MPs who are doing a very good job of standing up for their local constituents. The challenge we have is we have 40,000 people in hotels all over the country costing the taxpayer £6 million a day. That needs to stop. We therefore need to identify and deliver alternative accommodation, and we're looking at a wide variety of sites and locations all over the country. The asylum seekers will be housed on these new sites. They will receive all appropriate support and as we bear down on our asylum backlog, they will eventually move on, and when we pass our illegal migration bill, if they don't have a right to be here, they'll be removed to a safe country.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Home Secretary confirm that her own department estimates that the measures within the illegal migration bill could cost the taxpayer up to £6 billion.
Secretary.
What I can confirm is the taxpayer is currently paying £3 billion a year to service this problem, £6 million a day. And therefore, I know that our bill, combined with our partnership with Rwanda, which will help us to stop the boats, will save the taxpayer huge amounts of money once we stop illegal migration.
Daniel Kosinski.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I support the Home Secretary in what is a very difficult task ahead of her, but I disagree with her on her comments on Rwanda. There are legitimate concerns about this country, and people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Kinshasa, claim that Rwanda is funding a terrorist organization, the M23, which is destabilizing northeast Congo and resulting in the deaths of many Congolese citizens. I would very much like the Home Secretary to recognize that and explain to the House what she is doing in conjunction with the Foreign Office to ensure that this unacceptable behavior by Rwanda to Congo is stopped.
Well, having visited Rwanda very recently and having met some of the migrants who have been resettled successfully in Rwanda from countries in the region, I have confidence in our scheme with Rwanda for the resettlement of asylum seekers and other migrants. They have a strong track record of supporting resettlement. But most importantly, our partnership with Rwanda has been exhaustively tested in the High Court and has been found to be lawful and compliant with international law. We're now awaiting the judgment in the Court of Appeal, and we will review their decision when it emerges.
Alan Dorrans.
Here, here.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and good afternoon. Madam Deputy Speaker, the hostile environment as the United Kingdom's government attempt to make the UK's immigration scheme as cruel, inhumane and draconian as possible, placing refugees and asylum seekers in essentially what are floating internment camps. Given the conditions in Manston and Napier led to overcrowding and appalling conditions with the worst spread of diphtheria in decades, can the Home Secretary reassure the House that these conditions will not be repeated on these barges or the recently identified MOD sites?
Here, here. Home Secretary.
Well, the new sites that are being rolled out will obviously meet all the requisite standards for accommodation for asylum seekers. The asylum seekers will be provided with the necessary supports, health and otherwise, so that they are appropriately supported. That is our legal duty and we'll comply with it.
Scott Benton.
You, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are still accepting a majority of asylum claims from a number of safe countries in stark contrast to many other European nations who reject a far higher proportion of claims from those same countries. Whilst we all want to reduce the asylum case backlog, does the Home Secretary agree with me that it must be done properly and we can't merely accept claims in a cynical attempt to drive down that backlog quickly?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Unlike the opposition, we are not going to grant an amnesty to people in our system. It is absolutely important that all cases are considered on their individual merits, but that actually we take a robust approach to applications and that we take an approach which makes it clear that if you come here illegally, you'll be detained and you'll be removed and you won't be entitled to a life in the UK.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This morning I met with the Law Society and they tell me that France receives 3 times the number of illegal migrants into their country compared to the UK. They also tell me that France is 3 times faster in processing the applications. So can the Home Secretary tell me, why is the government failing so badly compared to France? And does she think there is lessons to be learned from France?
Home Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to my French counterpart and the French government for their very good cooperation on this challenge. It's clear that we have a common challenge. The illegal migration problem that many European countries are facing is one which is very similar to the one we are facing. Almost all of my European counterparts are grappling with this issue because we are facing a global migration crisis, and that's why it requires a collaborative approach, and that's why I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister has been working hard to achieve a consensus amongst European allies.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In this month of all months, Pride Month, I want to follow up on the answer that the Home Secretary gave to my colleague from the Rhondda, because we know that Uganda has introduced a law that brings in the death penalty for what it terms aggravated homosexuality. Goodness knows how that would go down in Soho. But is she saying that if a Ugandan was on a boat and came here on a boat, she would deport them to Rwanda, which in 2021, during the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference, was detaining LGBT people and claiming that they did not represent Rwandan values? Has she even read her own Home Office Equality Impact Assessment that details the illegal treatment? So will she rule out today deporting any Ugandans to Rwanda from the UK?
Yeah. Home Secretary.
Well, I will ask her about, has she even read the High Court judgment, which looks extensively at our agreement with Rwanda, and it looks in detail at our arrangements with Rwanda, and it concludes emphatically that our agreement is lawful, and that when it comes to Article 3, for example, kind of claims that she would be talking about, there is no issue with the treatment of asylum seekers if they were to be in Rwanda. So I encourage her to do her homework before she makes gross misassumptions about Rwanda.
Patrick Grady.
Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary keeps talking about achieving value for money for the taxpayer. Well, has she made a calculation of what the net gain to the Treasury would be if asylum seekers were granted the right to work? Because then they would be able to pay for their own accommodation and they would pay taxes into the system instead of taking money out.
Home Secretary.
I disagree with his ingenious proposal, because the reality is that the right to work would act as a magnet, and it would act as a pull factor in this very complex issue that we are trying to stop. We want to disincentivise people from coming here, not incentivise them with the right to work.
Dame Nia Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, local residents and I are very concerned at the Home Secretary's proposals to house 200 asylum seekers in the Stradey Park Hotel in my constituency. So will she agree to meet me to hear about our concerns and to explain what she is doing to increase the pace of clearing the backlog of 160,000 undetermined asylum claims so that those from safe countries can be returned, and so that there will be no need for her to consider using the Stradey Park Hotel?
Well, I can give the Honourable Lady some advice for free. The best way to stop the use of hotels is to stop the boats. And I encourage her to back our legislation, which will enable us to stop the boats and stop the use of hotels.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to raise the use of divisive language by the Home Secretary throughout this statement on immigration, and a few weeks ago when she described multiculturalism as a recipe for communal disaster. As a product of multiculturalism myself, and representing Luton North, a town proudly multicultural, let me tell her she is wrong. There are thousands like me from multicultural families. Does she really want to deny our right to exist? And isn't the truth that the use of such vile rhetoric is just a cynical ploy to turn people against each other, rather on those truly responsible for the backlogs, for the boats, and for the needless deaths, this Conservative government?
Secretary.
I prefer to focus on the problem and the solutions to the problem. And the problem we have here, one that is, the British public overwhelmingly support the government's plans on, is to stop the boats. The Leader of the Opposition doesn't even really want to talk about it. But this Prime Minister, this government, has delivered a plan, is delivering on its plan to stop the boats and deliver for the British people.
Colin Mahmood.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Home Office
Secretary of State understand. She has said today that she wants to use the armed forces, estate and the barracks. Does she understand what condition they are in? Does she understand what additional costs are going to be to repair them, to make them habitable? And how much will that add to the already £6 billion that she's spending on this new bill? And how will that affect us in our hospitals and our schools and children for our education?
Home Secretary.
The answer is yes. I've been working flat out with the Prime Minister on identifying alternative sites and rolling out alternative accommodation on those sites. We're very much aware of the particular nature and characteristics of the different sites, and we're very much aware of the needs that their occupants will have. Those needs will be met, and people will be housed in a humane, appropriate and cost-effective way.
Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Home Secretary just claimed in a statement that the asylum initial decision backlog is down by 17,000. But the Home Office's own statistics say that initial decision cases are now 173,000, up from 161,000 in December. So will the Home Secretary admit the colossal scale and epic costs of her failures running into the hundreds of millions of pounds to the British taxpayer? And will she withdraw that incorrect claim?
Home Secretary.
As I said to the Honourable Gentleman's colleague, he really does need to listen more carefully to what the Prime Minister promised back in his statement. And we are on track to deliver on reducing the backlog of initial decisions in the legacy backlog. Those are decisions which have been waiting in the system up until July or June last year. Those are the backlogs that we are working on, and we're making good progress on eliminating it.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary's statement on the boats mentions the need to acquire 2 further prison boats, but the Prime Minister is refusing to say where those prison boats will be located. So I'd like to know from the Home Secretary whether there's been any relevant discussions with the local authorities, and whether she plans to recruit more staff to fix the broken immigration system with 172,000 backlog.
Home Secretary.
Our new sites will be rolled out following and in conjunction with close consultation with the relevant authorities, local authorities, but health authorities, education authorities, so that the occupants receive the appropriate care. We have doubled the number of caseworkers in our asylum caseworking team, and that's why we're making progress on bearing down on our backlog.
And finally, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Children who have been brought into this country from desperate situations will bring with them not simply the trauma of events, but also the very real physical ailments that are part and parcel of those who flee from persecution. The Secretary of State has referred to that. Will the Secretary of State outline how their needs can possibly be met in the proposed housing arrangement? And will the Secretary of State allow for the fact that exceptional family circumstances deserve to be part of that key family consideration?
Home Secretary.
Asylum seekers, whether they are accommodated in the UK or whether they are relocated to a safe country like Rwanda, will always receive the appropriate level of support to which they are entitled. Where we have legal duties, we abide by them, and where we have a duty of care to asylum seekers, we meet it.
Ordinarily, I will only take points of order after all statements and UQs are finished, but I will take a point of order from the Shadow Home Secretary if it is specifically to do with the statement that has just been delivered. Point of order, Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is specific to a sentence in the Home Secretary's statement and her answer to the Honourable Member for Bermondsey. It's a factual issue. She said the asylum initial decision backlog is down by 17,000, whereas the Home Office official statistics say the asylum initial backlog is now over 170,000, up from 160,000 in December. So the facts are the asylum initial decision backlog is up over 10,000, not down by 17,000. I know there was a lot of nonsense in what the Home Secretary said. Sometimes it's hard to know where to start. But this is about facts, the facts given to Parliament. Will she now withdraw this incorrect statement that she has made because her facts are wrong?
Let us remember, this is not a continuation of a debate. This is a point of order to the Chair, and it's not a matter for the Chair. The way in which facts are presented here in the chamber is entirely... Who's shouting at me? The way in which facts are presented here in the chamber is entirely a matter for the Minister or any other member who is presenting the facts. If the Home Secretary wishes to say anything further to the point of order, but she doesn't. So this is not... No, that's enough. This is not a matter for the Chair. We cannot continue the debate. It is a matter of debate. It's a matter of interpretation of statistics, and I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for having drawn her concerns to the attention of the House, of the Chair, and indeed of the Home Secretary. Further to that point of order, Mr. Bright. Sir Chris.
I think this is a matter for the Chair. Can you just confirm, Madam Deputy Speaker, that not only is it a matter for the Ministerial Code that a Minister must always present the facts as they believe them to be true, but sometimes inadvertently Ministers make mistakes, and there is a proper process for being able to correct the record. So it may be that when the Home Secretary goes away and goes back to her office and realises that the Home Office statistics are not quite as she has presented them to the House, that there is a means, and that you'll be able to confirm it to her now, that there is a means for her to be able to correct the record.
There is. That is a point of order for the Chair, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for it. There is indeed a means for correction, and I think that all ministers in this House are well aware of that. Indeed, it is open to any member to correct the record if they consider that a mistake has been made, but certainly... I take the point of order from the Honourable Gentleman, and he wants to argue with me. It's not a matter of argument. Anyone can correct the record. But what the Honourable Gentleman has said is absolutely correct. There is a specific process for a Minister who is delivering complicated statistics provided by a department. If it were to transpire, and I have no idea whether on this specific occasion there is such a discrepancy, I have no idea whatsoever. If it were to transpire that there were to be a mistake, then there is a procedure for correcting that. So, thank you. We will now progress to the next statement. And before we do so, I have a short statement to make about sub-judice, which is important in connection with the matter which we are about to consider. While some of the matters to be covered in the statement are currently being considered by the courts, given the national importance of the issue, Mr. Speaker is exercising his ability to waive the sub-judice resolution in order to allow references to them both during proceedings on this statement and on an ongoing basis. Statement, Minister Jeremy Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, for being granted permission to make a statement on the Government's decision to seek a judicial review on a specific point of law related to the public inquiry into the COVID pandemic. The whole House will recognise that on any issue, as you so eloquently said, Madam Deputy Speaker, on any issue before the courts, a minister needs to act and speak with extreme sensitivity. We fully respect the difficult role that judges need to perform, and I appreciate the conventions of this place designed to ensure that we do not make that role of sober and detailed consideration of the facts of law by those qualified to do so any harder. I'm sure the House would respect the fact that for those reasons it would be inappropriate for me to debate the fine details of this case. Notwithstanding this, Madam Deputy Speaker, we felt that there was a very real public interest in the broader issue of why the Government would take the unusual step of asking for a judicial review on a point of technical difference between it and an inquiry it has established. That being the case, we felt, as ever, that it should be raised here in this House. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government fully supports the vital work of the inquiry as it seeks to establish the facts and lessons to be learned from the response to the pandemic. It is right that the inquiry into COVID-19 handling in the UK is comprehensive and rigorous. It is being chaired by Baroness Hallett, an eminent former Court of Appeal judge. This dispute seeks the guidance of the courts on a narrow and technical point of law. It does not touch on the Government's confidence in the inquiry. Nor does it in any way affect the Government's intention to continue its full cooperation with the inquiry. To date, the Cabinet Office alone has submitted 55,000 documents to the inquiry. We will continue to provide any and all COVID-related materials requested. We are grateful for the work being undertaken by the inquiry chair and her team. The pandemic was one of the most difficult times for our country in living memory, with so many people losing so much. The inquiry's task is challenging, and they must have the support of us all in conducting their work and in a timely way bringing forward their conclusions. The core point of principle which is raised is whether there are limits to the power of the inquiry to compel information and documents to be produced. Specifically, the question raised by the compulsory notice under the Inquiries Act that was served on the Cabinet Office is whether the inquiry has the power to compel production of documents and messages which are unambiguously irrelevant to the inquiry's work, including personal communications and matters unconnected to the Government's handling of COVID. The notice received is bound to include a range of material of that nature. It covered a 2-year period and a range of documents, including WhatsApp messages relating to my right honourable friend, the member for Uxbridge, and a former special advisor. I reiterate, Madam Deputy Speaker, all material which is relevant to the inquiry's work has been and will be provided to the inquiry. Likewise, material about which there might be real questions about its relevance to that work. There is no question that all internal discussions on COVID in any form requested by the inquiry will be made transparently available to it. Yeah. What has been redacted, and so not provided in response to the notice, is material which the Cabinet Office considers to be clearly and unambiguously irrelevant to that work. That material includes, for example, communications about purely personal matters and about other aspects of the Government's policy and work which have nothing to do with COVID. It is that material, and that material alone, that is the subject of the judicial review. Honourable members wanting to see more detail of our concerns may be interested in our letter to the inquiry sent last Thursday, which is available on the Government's website, and a copy of which I will deposit in the library of the House. Madam Deputy Speaker, as in any such dispute, there are two sides to this debate. Baroness Hallett, as I have said, is a highly respected senior judge and inquiry chair, in whom the Government has great confidence. The inquiry has made relevant statements regarding the Government's position on its website, to which I would draw the House's attention. The inquiry will no doubt be making further statements. Above all, as I understand it, the inquiry believes it should be for the inquiry alone to judge the relevance of the material requested. We respect that position, and as I've indicated, Cabinet Office has provided material about which there might be a dispute. Where we differ with the inquiry is, and only is, in relation to material which is considered to be clearly and unambiguously irrelevant, and considered to be so after careful checking. This is a genuine and sincere difference of opinion on which we are seeking the guidance of the courts. I do, however, want to assure the House that the Government has explored ways with the inquiry to bridge the gap between these sincerely held but differing views, and we will continue to do so. We appreciate the patience and goodwill shown by the inquiry as we have sought to identify a mutually acceptable solution. We have also sought to assure the inquiry on the nature of the redactions of non-relevant material from the information requested in the Section 21 notice, and how these would operate. The process deployed to ascertain and redact unambiguously irrelevant material from that information is as follows. Witnesses are required to identify any material that may contain potentially relevant information to the inquiry, with guidance from the Council team supporting them. This is then reviewed by the Council team, who identify any material that is unambiguously irrelevant. The Council team discusses this with the witness in case there are any context or details of which they may not be aware. The review by the Council team includes the assessment of a King's Counsel instructed by the Cabinet Office. No decision to redact material as unambiguously irrelevant has been or will be taken by a witness acting alone. These redactions will all be kept under review, such that if the scope of the Chair's inquiry changes, she will be able to receive the material that becomes potentially relevant.